based mobile gaming publisher focused more on casual titles. So our titles include Harry Potter, Hogwarts Mystery, Disney Emoji Blitz, and Cookie Jam and Cookie Jam Blast. So in terms of your question, I think for working from home situation, communication has become even more crucial. Kudos to what Carter has said. So in this case, I would rather over communicate than less communicate, just because, you know, like we always have interactions face to face when we're back in the office. But like right now with work from home, there are so many information that could have been lost during the transaction. So I would rather, you know, like just to make sure we have the processes ready and then over communicate. Like I think even smaller things can be picked up in the wrong way. So I think that's like internally communication is like essential, and also keep a closer eye on the overall high level market trend. Because as growth marketers, because I come from like a UA world, so we get really caught up in the busy day-to-day routine. But it with the COVID situation, I just realized, you know, it's really important to closely following the trend, as those who acted really fast can enjoy the benefit of the early adopters.
Okay, cool. And you are lucky because you are from a gaming industry, so it wasn't harmful for you, you know, this period versus some other industry. Julia, what about you?
Yeah, my name's Julie, and I'm the growth marketing manager for Stitcher, which is a free podcast app. And I think I kind of thought of this question in the similar terms to Marcy, like things that we've really been focusing on is nurturing our current users as their lives have changed so drastically. Like podcasts are something you do every day or is part of like your routine. Like a lot of people listen to their podcast on their commute. Well, now your commute has changed, or maybe if you're still going, even if you're still going into work, it's a lot shorter because there's less traffic, things like that. So we've just really tried to focus on ways that we can organically communicate with our current users and kind of nurture them through this change, and like realize that maybe their podcast listening has changed, like offering them doing like, here's a list of like podcasts that are less than 15 minutes long. Like maybe in pre-COVID time, you had time in your week to listen to, you know, a 3-hour hardcore history podcast, but you don't have that time anymore, but you still want to kind of engage. And so giving users like the tools to use the platform in a new way that maybe they didn't use it previously has been important to us. And just kind of, yeah, giving them kind of space to figure out how to use our app in this new routine that they find themselves in.
True that, I agree with you, especially with the personal life. Like I was spending like 3 or 4 hours to get to Barcelona. I'm living in Canet de Mar. It's 50 kilometers from Barca, so I gonna save a lot of time because of this situation. On another side, yes. In our app also the user behavior completely changed, especially at the beginning of the crisis, because we are also the main focus was food delivery, and most of our partners in core markets shut down. So other opportunities and other categories will increase, something like groceries, because people were afraid to go to the supermarket, and they try to order through our app, and you know, like for that kind of stuff, it was really useful for us, and we get a lot of unique customers as well because of this situation. As a follow-up to my previous question, the next question coming up. During this COVID situation, like different industries face a different stages. Some of them are even shut down. Some of them are struggling, like a travel industry and like car sharing stuff and whatever. And some of them are really getting advantage of it. Something like a kids app or social media or e-commerce. And what about your industry? How COVID impacts on your users, and of course in terms of user acquisition, what are you seeing, Savannah?
Yeah, So I think fortunately gaming was actually one of the few beneficiaries from this pandemic. So we were really fortunate to be able to leverage this opportunity and grow our UA efforts during this time, largely due to the lower CPMs that we observe on social channels. So when the brand money pulls out, it basically leaves a lot of room for the DR advertisers to leverage the opportunity. And we also noticed a pretty significant organic uptick on our several of our titles, mainly because people are staying more at home and they have more time to entertain themselves, including playing the games. So with those organic uplift, we are allowed to basically grow more on the UA front. And we were basically looking at some early indicators, like return on ad spend, to decide like which title or like which channel to push more. And we do see a pretty significant revenue growth during this time because of all the aforementioned methods.
Okay, cool, great. What about you, Julia?
So like I said, we're a podcast app. So we did kind of see a little dip right as things closed, which was pretty directly attributed to commute. It was like a dip right in that like 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. time period. And that dip was pretty small and stayed pretty consistent as things stayed closed. And then now as things are opening back up across the world, that is going back up. So that was nice. I think I kind of touched on this in my first bit as well, as we really quickly as a team pivoted to, okay, so everyone who uses the app's routine has drastically changed, and podcasts are something that is really part of people's routine. They listen on their commute, they listen while they're exercising. So how do we as marketers help them switch their routine and put podcasting back in the routine? And so a lot of those efforts were organic. Like we started doing social media series about how you could listen to podcasts in quarantine. Our push notification messaging changed, email messaging changed, kind of to keep our current listeners engaged and give them ideas on how to use the app. And then, yeah, so I think that was the biggest thing for us, was just to nurture our current users and try to keep that, churn as low as we could. And I think we did a pretty good job, but it is nice to see that number going back up.
Yeah, true. That's the same situation we also experienced, that we got a new users as well, new unique users because of this grocery stuff, and now we have to keep them and to provide the better services, because things also changing back slightly, but changing back and back, and we are doing our best to keep them inside our app. What about your industry? Yeah.
Flip side is like, oh, that's just interesting. Like the flip side, like you have kind of the opposite problem where you've gained a lot of new users who have a different routine. So how do you keep this as part of their—
Exactly, yes. And we are facing the challenge that, for instance, the people who are buying groceries, they are not too keen to order the food, and it's also a big challenge for us to convince them that it's also safe to order like food. Marcy?
So Spruce is a service that enables mainly busy professionals who work outside of the home to have background checked and licensed housekeepers and dog walkers come to their house, right? So you can imagine what the impact was when people started working from home. Obviously, you're not going to need those services. So the recovery had been really U-shaped, though we were seeing some recovery as I stepped away. The challenge for us was to claw back those customers, and that's sort of like something that's been unheralded. You've never really seen sort of a precedent where, 30% of your customer base is wiped out overnight, and you've got to figure out a way 3 to 4 months later to get them to come back to your platform. So it was on the marketing team to really figure out like what is going to be our promotional strategy for getting those customers back. So we were in process on that. But we also really used that time wisely, in my opinion, to retool our tech stack. So we used that time to switch over from Keep to Iterable and drive up sort of our analytics and attribution basis within our Google Analytics tools. And we completely rebranded all of our, welcome packages and all of our email campaigns. So we used the time for something that we had always wanted to do. It was just an unfortunate matter that sort of like we didn't make much money during that time, but we were able to sort of set ourselves up for a really sharp recovery.
Cool. And what is the impact for implementing this and for doing this stuff from your side?
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
What was the impact of implementation? For instance, email marketing. You mentioned that you optimize stuff. Yeah, do you see any huge impact from that?
Yeah. So right away, within 2 weeks of sort of implementing the new omnichannel tool, Iterable, we saw a significant improvement in conversion rate, which was the main KPI that we were optimizing for. That 2 weeks period is not enough time to really formulate like a solid baseline for performance. And we hadn't implemented any of our growth campaigns that we had laid out while we were collecting that data. So unfortunately, I don't have any other information to report, but I will say that anecdotally using this tool versus Keep was a huge improvement from a marketing team perspective.
Okay, cool. What about your industry, Carter? Tell us.
Yeah. So we're in a really interesting space, right? Because we're trying to help small business owners do their banking, and small business owners are probably, or like one of the hardest hit industries by this, like restaurant owners and landscapers. So our users have been hit really hard from it in terms of just being able to run their business. But because we're a completely mobile bank, we've actually benefited from it. A lot of banking in the US is still done in a branch, and branches are closed. So like kind of our communications around branchless banking, mobile banking have been really effective during COVID. And also even just like, just kind of like amplify that. We've been doing a lot of work just calling kind of the business owners who use our product and seeing how they're dealing with the situation, seeing for existing users, seeing the parts of our product that are helping them most during these times, and then doubling down on messaging around that. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is we really pushed and got access to the government SBA PPP loans. So government loans to help small business owners just like get through this. And so, as soon as we got that, we really shifted to focus on getting as many of our existing users and as many new users access to those government funds as possible. Like the process for getting those loans through the government directly is really, really hard. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of legalese. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. And it's actually been working. We've given out like millions of dollars of loans to our customers, which has been good for like our business, but it's also really, it's like great to see like we've gotten on calls with people who've got the loans and they're like thanking us for helping them get through this.
I completely agree with you with the small businesses. In our case, a lot of restaurants were shutting down. Even our top partners were shutting down for our core countries, and that was the big hard from our business for the first 2-3 weeks. But then situation recovered, and now we are even getting benefits from this because as I mentioned, we also get additional traffic as a grocery consumer. A lot of other companies also are doing some calculation around LTV, and I'm curious, Marcy, maybe you can help me with this question. How you calculate LTV and how it changed, and can you rely on these figures right now, or what is your opinion about it?
LTV is a really good topic. So, I think when people talk about LTV, we tend to oversimplify what the calculation is. And it's actually a lot more complicated to actually figure out how you're going to measure that for your company. And I'll give you an example. So if you Google, like, how do I calculate LTV? The typical definition for the formula for the calculation is LTV equals ARPU over revenue or customer churn. Our actual calculation at Spruce was this: LTV equals new customers times AOV times booking over month times gross margin times average customer life.
Nice.
So And that took probably like 3 months, and the combination of effort from a business analyst and a CFO and the CEO and me and a third party to kind of come up with that calculation, and then actually being able to measure it. Because it's just not an easy thing to do. And then you get into the sort of the issue of, I'm seeing the chat. Can you write this out on LTV? Okay, we'll look at that in a little bit. So then you get into the issue of like, you can't really, as a growth marketer, measure your efficacy based on LTV, because there's a couple different drawbacks to actually that calculation. The first is if you have tons of customers and tons of data, that number is going to be relatively stable over a period of time. And so any sort of like growth experiment that you run, you're not going to see a major difference in that calculation, and you're not going to get sort of a really true measurement on your efficacy of your efforts. On the other side, if you don't have very many customers and you do that calculation, you're going to see it really spiky. And that's not helpful either, right? And it's going to lead to sort of like complicated reporting at the board level. And you know, it's just a confusing measurement. So what I found recently is that you're better off really focusing on lengthening the customer lifetime and really focusing on drawing down your payback period. And if you look at that from a customer cohort perspective, then you get a better lens into the efforts of your marketing team and the experiments that you're running. And you can like slice and dice customer cohorts like across tons of different variables. So if you're Walmart, for example, you might look at it from customers that bought electronics for the first time versus school supplies. Or you might look at it by market, you know, for your customers that are in Salt Lake versus in Dallas. And you need to really focus in with your finance and your analyst team to really give you that view so that you can understand the efforts that your team is doing and the performance that you're having.
Okay, but how we change during the COVID? Do you see any difference in cohort? No?
Yeah, it tanked. They weren't spending any money.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But do you see also recovery for your industry?
By the time I left, it was like 2 weeks ago, there was no recovery.
Oh, okay, cool. Another question I have to Julie regarding offline marketing. So offline marketing, there was like the observation that there will be a shifting from offline to online marketing, especially because of this crisis situation. What is your opinion about that, and what is your experience during this period?
Yeah, I think. So I think offline is really broad, right? So because it can mean like billboards, it can mean print, it can mean TV, it can mean radio, it can mean podcast ads, which we sell. And so I also think it definitely depends on the app that you're trying to market. Like if you're a grocery delivery app, you maybe spent a ton of money on marketing during this time. Versus if you're a hotel booking app, you probably didn't spend any money on marketing during this time. So, for us, really the most consistent form of offline marketing that we do for the Stitcher app is podcast ads. And we do see actually a good return on investment in those pre, during, and hopefully post coronavirus. But I think, offline is I think billboards and radio and print have kind of already been dying a little bit, right? There's always going to be your Coca-Cola who doesn't care about spending money on a Times Square billboard. But for like a Jam, I don't know your marketing plan, Jam City, but for like a smaller, games app, like it's probably doesn't make sense for you guys to spend $20 million on out of home, right? And I'm guessing your COVID marketing, you were still marketing during COVID because you guys had an uptick in users and you were doing that online. So yeah, I think, will it change, offline marketing coronavirus? It's definitely possible that it would just make users realize, or marketers realize, that maybe it's not worth the investment in brand. But I think like the bigger players are always going to feel like brand is fine, and this is just money that we spend on brand and we don't really track it or care. I used to work at an ad agency before this for a big client, and
Okay.
they did not care about tracking brand. They're like,
Okay.
we spend this money, we don't care what happens to it. That sounds nice. That's not my current, you know, I don't think probably anyone on this panel probably has that current situation.
But what about TV channel? What about TV channel? Do you have any?
Yeah, you know, people are home more, so I think it would make sense if you can, if you have the money. I would, if I was still managing that big brand budget, I would definitely pivot to TV and print. Like people who get magazines are still going to get those delivered and read them, right? So TV and print over like a billboard or over radio. I'm assuming no one's listening to like terrestrial radio right now, unless you're still commuting, which is not a lot of people. So that would be my strategy. I think it's hard too for an app because none of those offline things, it's really hard to attribute. You know, like I said, we do podcast ads. We've actually done TV in the past because our parent company owns TV stations, and it's, you can give, you know, you can say like go to Stitcher.com/ like if we're running in the podcast app, I'm sorry, the podcast like This American Life, you can say like go to Stitcher.com/ This American Life to download today, and you can track people who do that, but not everyone's going to do that. So who are you losing in the attribution? And I think it's just a lot easier to do mobile advertising because we can use things like, you know, Branch and AppsFlyer and Address to just directly track and attribute what's working and what's not, versus like a print ad or a radio spot. That's a lot harder to attribute. But that's just like my personal strategy.
Okay, great. Regarding like questions to all of you guys, like what is for you a best channel in terms of user acquisition, and what alternatives do you see for the main channels that are right now, and what type of I don't know, creatives work the best for this channel? I want to ask Savannah.
Sure. So it actually sounds a little bit cliche for me, but the duopoly of Facebook and Google are like, you know, the standard big players for gaming advertisers. I think just with the amount of data they can collect from both the users' end and also from the advertisers to basically train their algorithm, it just makes their algorithm way more advanced and robust than, you know, say the smaller networks. And I think it actually makes the smaller networks' life really tough to compete with them. And also, since they're self-attributed, it have basically a huge advantage in the attribution waterfall that like they can claim whatever they want to claim, right? So, so I think that's like a huge advantage to them. And I mean, don't get me wrong, there are still like networks working for different types of games or apps here and there, but I think for gaming, it actually depends on, you know, the genre of your app or game. But I think for gaming, like the duopoly of Facebook and Google for now is definitely like the biggest player. And in terms of this scale, while keeping their profitability, I think they're so far the best.
Okay, cool. What about your experience, Carter? What are the alternative channels that you think will be, you know, like boosting in future?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with Savannah. Like, I think the duopoly is here to stay for the medium to long term. I think they'll continue. They just A, have more eyeballs, and B, like way better ad tech. So our best performing UA channel is Facebook and Google. It also, they just have better targeting for business owners, right? And with better targeting, you can nail down your kind of value props and creative that work with your customers. I think probably in the near future, I do think like TikTok, Snapchat, Reddit, Pinterest, kind of those like secondary social networks could take a bunch of the market share if they figure out better ad tech options, like better targeting and campaign optimization. Like to the extent that they'll do that, they'll probably take some market share, but I don't see Facebook and Google going away anytime soon. There's like profitability. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Marcy, which type of creatives works best, like a video or static or GIF or whatever, like in your industry
I mean, I
or
think
your app?
it depends for us based on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do acquisition versus retention, we see differences in types of campaign strategies that work. Can I pile on to what Savannah and Carter were talking about really quickly though? Because I have an additional question.
Sure.
So in my experience, I was able to see great success in the duopoly for driving volume, but I was actually able to see better ROI with programmatics because I was able to leverage a per event action. So I'm wondering, and our sample size was probably smaller than you guys, but I'm wondering if that holds true now.
Like we try a lot of programmatic stuff, but they bring a lot of fraud traffic in most cases as well. So I mean, initially, you know, if you don't have an attribution tool for fraud, you are super happy with them, but then you realize that there are a lot of fraud stuff. In our case, yeah. I don't know, guys.
Yeah,
what is your experience?
I would just agree with you, George. Yeah, they get a lot of like cheap signups, but if you look at like the LTV of those signups, or even just like the retention rates, it tends to they're bad.
But you can get them to pay per like conversion. So do you still see like bad quality conversions?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, just you'll get up to that conversion point, and then after whatever conversion point, long run, it's usually lower churn. I mean, they work to an extent, just not as well as with Google. For us,
let's move forward. I want to ask Julie regarding what are you doing in automation in user acquisition? Are you doing? Do you have a special tech team, or I don't know? Do you have an analytical team who is doing a report manually, or you implement it and you do some templates or whatever?
Yeah. So hi, my video got big. Yeah, so automation in our acquisition efforts, or automation in analytical efforts, or both?
Both.
Okay. So automation in analytical efforts, yeah, there is some of that. Like we have an attribution and MMP tool, as well as like a data visualization tool. And then we have a marketing analytics person on our team who works on attribution for a bunch of different marketing things, but also for attribution. And then I actually do a lot of my reporting manually, just because the attribution tool helps. I mean, I can say we used to use Adjust and we're moving to AppsFlyer for attribution. That helps, but it doesn't always calculate all the things that I want to look at, and especially because podcast app is kind of different than what those things are built for necessarily. They're catering more to like gaming, or like they focus a lot on revenue, whereas like I said, we're a free podcast app. So we don't make revenue necessarily based on users. We make revenue from the ads that we sell in the app, and then other things within the company. And so for me, I want to calculate a lot of things that aren't always baked into those things to automate. But it would be nice if it was more automated. And then automation in terms of the acquisition. Yeah, I mean, I probably, similar to everyone else, like the tools that are automated, like Google UAC is pretty automated, or if you're doing like mobile ad networks.
No, I'm talking about automation of, for instance, templates for email template for sending, or this kind of stuff.
Okay.
Do you do something in this direction, or it's like manually?
Yeah. So no, we do. So we also use Iterable for our email and push notification automation needs. And most of it is templatized and kind of set out already on a schedule. So that is kind of like takes a lot of like the work out of it for us, but there is still times when we go in and we'll like do things kind of special, or you know, if we have a show drop like a really exciting episode, like for example, recently one of our podcasts had Joe Biden on. We also had a podcast who did like a deep dive into the stuff that was happening at Bon Appetit. And so both of those episodes we made kind of custom special push notifications for and social posts for outside of the automation stack. So I think having both of those things is important, right? Like it's good. You want to automate the things that you can, but you don't want to get to a point where you can't pivot and quickly like make stuff that works for your company. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you're, you know,
in our case, we were struggling a lot of stuff. We were asking our core tech team to do some templates, to do automation of reports or whatever. But we solved this. We get to the solution that we have to create our own tech team, and we did it last year. And we through this tech team we complete more than 100 online and not only online stuff like a template. IPAs, I don't know, some dashboards, analytical dashboards, and everything is super automated right now. And we don't need to hire someone who do the job manually. And it's even not the future, but in my opinion, it's present. And as soon as all apps inside our tech industry gonna understand this, it will be better to increase the efficiency of the work itself. Yeah. What about? I want to ask about incrementality tests over the user acquisition incremental test that impacts on organic. Carter, do you have any experience to do this kind of tests? And like what impact do you see?
Yeah, so like nailing down kind of the impact that paid has on organic channels.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, there's no like perfect way to do this. It's, by its like definition, impossible to actually measure. I think the simplest thing to do is just to get a baseline for it and then incorporate that baseline into your like modeling, like growth modeling. So we've done that just by shutting off all our performance marketing and then seeing the effect that has on just like baseline organic attribution, and then using that as a like multiplier on performance in our growth modeling. But yeah, I think that's like V1 of doing that, and it's hard to do. Like there's no correct way to do it perfectly.
Okay, Mercy. Do you have any? Did you do any tests or whatever to get impact on paid and organic?
Yeah, so we would use different incentive models for each channel to sort of measure the efficacy, and we were able to do segmentation based on sort of what the offer is and customer type, and sort of measure the differences. So, I mean, I agree with Carter. There's no perfect way to do it. And honestly, the best way to do it is to shut off everything, like you said, and figure out what your baseline is. But that's not normally a desirable action to take in a growth company, you know? And so you tend to sort of like hobble along and try to be like, it's fine. Organic is fine. We're still going to do these other things though.
I'm a bit disagree with you, because we did couple tests, and we even did a different tactics. So for one test we increased the spend, but the cons was that the money that we put we couldn't make to spend, you know, on a daily basis. So that was the one kind of limitation from this test. And we did another test. We just cut the budget for one of our region. We took two regions, cut budget for out of one region, and we see a really good like results out of this test. So if you have this opportunity or possibility, like I also recommend you to follow the same stuff. In terms of Savannah, I want to ask you about the multi-touch attribution. How do you go about studying the differences in behavior on ASA, UAC, and Facebook to decide which is the optimal attribution system for them?
Yeah, so I think multi-touch attribution sounds like a blanket term. So you can refer to that as, say, like, the brand campaign, how to measure, like TV or, like billboards, those efforts. It also can be referred to measure like the user journey within the apps. So for us, I think it based on your campaign objective and the KPIs you're looking at. As mobile or predominantly mobile advertisers, we actually have the benefit of tracking down to the device level, which really helps with accuracy, say, rather than, like say fingerprinting or multi-touch attribution. So with multi-touch attribution, I don't think we have like a really built out infrastructure for like gaming advertisers. So we rely mostly on MMP data, say like Adjust, AppsFlyer, and all that. And then we cross-reference with, the platform claimed data. And we also built a in-house data warehouse, which stores all those historical data like on IDFA and those user IDs so that we can basically cross-reference and map. And in terms of like different channels, I think for self-attributed channels, it's kind of hard to do that because they already claim whatever they can, and their attribution window is pretty long. So with MMP data, we are able to carve out basically click-through based on last click attribution and then view-through attribution. So in terms of view-through, it's a little bit risky to measure. So we pay close attention to like the differences of LTVs between these two cohorts of users. And we found that sometimes different creative formats matters. So for example, like if you like track view-through attribution on statics, sometimes those user quality tend to be really low during the long term because there are only limited information can be conveyed in statics, and then people might end up not liking the app or game they play, and then it's high likelihood for them to churn. So I think it's basically segment on your user base and then segment based on your campaign settings really helps us to check on the different attribution settings.
Yeah, of course, as well, the user behavior is different for search ads. Users are already there, and it's easier to engage them, and versus other channels, versus Facebook and versus search campaigns. Yeah. The next question is to you, Carter. As you are experienced in SEO, and we have a like in our company also we have work done with SEO, and based on my experience, it was super hard to convince people like management because we are like the mobile first company, to move forward with SEO. What is your experience? How a mobile first company can leverage web SEO?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we actually do invest in SEO. I think most traffic around business banking actually comes through mobile, so it's a great opportunity for us. It's a super long-term bet though that requires a lot of resources. So the way that I think about it is you need to make the case for getting the resources to invest in it if it makes sense in the long term. So the way that I went about it was validating different like keyword groupings using SEM ads and landing pages to see how many users you could get from certain keyword groups. And if you can get users from certain keyword groups, projecting out what you think you can get from investing in the SEO in the long term. So like, let's say we're thinking about rank for like open a business bank account online, right? You set up an SEM campaign with a like free landing page, see the conversion rate, and then use that data to build like a model that can show you based on like what resources you would have to invest in SEO. So that's like a SEO manager, probably a copywriter, engineering to build the landing pages, what's the opportunity cost of doing that versus spending the money on paid ads, and when do you actually get a return on that? So if you have like a roughly accurate model in place, you can compare the resources you would put onto SEO over like a certain time period versus spending those resources on ads. And then once you have that model in place, you can go, yeah, because it's hard to go to management and be like, hey, I want to spend this thing that'll have results in 2 years. So actually having like the business case built out for it in terms of like how it's going to affect user growth and revenue in different scenarios.
The same. We also experienced from our side. We built from the scratch, and the management at the beginning was super skeptical. But if you're planning rollout for the long term, this is one of the best strategy to implement it on a long term period.
Yeah. It also, like, for each company is going to be a different scenario, right? Like if you're going to run out of money in 3 months, like you shouldn't invest in SEO.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to come to management with, like, the key thing there is timelines, because it's such a long-term bet. Like if you're in a position to make a 2-year bet, then I would look into it. If you're not, then I would focus on getting better at paid. Okay,
cool. Let's try to answer it from the questions from Q&A. Yeah? So one of the questions is, do you see the growth in subscribers from your CRM, and how do you manage it? If so, guys, who wants to answer on it? Someone using a subscription model or not? No. I can actually answer on it. It depends on the industry, because for instance, for some of the industries, they even subscription rate, the amount of subscriptions even increase. For instance, the kids, kids apps and the kids learning apps, subscription rate increased dramatically for these apps, because people are staying with their kids at home, and they have to be engaged. Yeah, so the amount of subscriptions, of course, increased from this industry. For others, of course, there was a lot of noise in terms of pushes or whatever for the apps that don't need during this crisis, and of course some of the apps failed on that. What is your experience, guys? In personal, do you, I don't know, do you unsubscribe for some of the apps, or do you remove it, or do you delete it, or you became inactive? Mercy, Carter, Julie, Savan.
Oh, I mean, I can say business-wise, we haven't seen a bump in unsubscribes or disabling push, so that because we have been monitoring those things, so it's good. But we also didn't up the number of times we did either of those things. We just changed the messaging around. So that might be why. I feel like anecdotally, I've had less time now, because I mean, I have a 2-year-old who was at home with us for most of this, and my husband and I are both working full-time from home. So I had less time to actually unsubscribe from emails, even if they were annoying, because it's I'm just trying to get to tomorrow. But that's just me.
Carter?
Is there a place we can see the question, or could you repeat it? Was it about?
Let me, so do you see the growth in subscribers from your CRM, and how do you manage it, if so?
Great, subscribers. Yeah, so we don't really use a full CRM platform. We just use marketing automation.
Okay.
So in terms of people's engagement, it's been pretty steady with kind of the communications we send out with our product. We haven't noticed a huge change, at least specific to.
But in personally?
Oh, personally?
Yeah.
Personally, I unsubscribed from almost anything I don't even kind of want to get, or reported as spam. But I've been doing that forever, to be honest.
The same for me. Okay. Yeah, Mercy.
Well, I've just personally been using the feature inside of my Gmail app that suggests brands to unsubscribe from. And I've been taking advantage of that quite a bit, you know, saying goodbye to the promotional emails.
Like the question that I want to, my favorite question is, what was during this period, during this last 3 months, your epic fail in terms of growth? What did you do wrongly, Savannah? Let's start. I gonna also give an answer, and I want to hear your answers as well.
Oh, sure. So yeah, regarding the CRM question, so we don't really do email marketing for gaming because it just didn't really make sense. So we mostly just do push notification, and then we don't really see like a drop in terms of you know, subscription or like engagement rate. I think during the pandemic, when the pandemic hit the most, we actually saw uptick from people engaging with the app or like asking for more lives during the forum or like on social media, meaning like they wanted to have more time engaged with the app. So I don't really see that trend. And in terms of the epic failure, that's a hard one. So I want to say maybe because we acted really fast in terms of, you know, like pushing up or be responsive for our UA spend and be more aggressive rather than lenient. So I think sometimes when we're pushing too aggressive, we might basically focus more on the short-term return rather than like the long-term. And it's not really a failure, but I think sometimes we would overlook you know, like the longer term just because we acted so fast. And even between channels, so like say Facebook or Google, sometimes we might be looking at, you know, like the low CPMs too much rather than, you know, focusing on like longer term growth.
Okay, cool. And Savannah, and then also on top of that, I want to ask you what are the key learnings in growth that over this period from your side?
All right, you're cutting off a little bit. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, what are the key learnings in terms of growth from your side?
Key learnings. Yeah.
During this period.
Yeah, so I think I repeated myself, but I think the like basically riding the wave early on is really beneficial for the business because like we acted basically late March when we saw like the significant CPM drop on social channels, and then we were pushing really aggressively, and then in I think mid to late April or early May, as more and more advertisers are basically reinvesting into, you know, user acquisition or like reactivating their activities, like the benefit of those lower CPMs is getting slimmer and slimmer. So I think the ability to be able to pivot and act it fast is really important for gaming because we are basically tracking you know, all the KPIs every day. And then I think there's one question I'd actually like to address in Q&A. So I think Steven asked like, what's the most underrated growth strategy that most people are not talking about? I think that's a really interesting one. So I think for like gaming, we always thought of, you know, UA as a no-brainer to basically acquire new users with paid methods. But actually, if you look at it, how to basically retain your current user base and leverage them to acquire more users for you, I think that's basically underrated, in my opinion, in the gaming space. So, you know, like we have basically invite system, but in your game UI, how to better implement that UI UX flow to allow users to more streamline, you know, seamlessly, basically invite their friends to play in the game. And we do have tracking for this segment of users, and we found that they're more likely to retain longer in the game since they're playing with their friends, and then there's more incentives for them to keep retaining and playing, and even eventually, you know, make IAP purchase in the game. So I think that's something I would really be interested in exploring more.
Okay, cool. Julie, epic fails and key learnings. Very short.
I've been trying to think of the epic fails. We honestly
So
haven't.
you don't have epic fails, yeah? You
No,
are
we
like,
well you
you
said
are
in the
doing
last 3
perfect.
months. I definitely have some epic fails that I can talk about, but honestly, in the last 3 months, we haven't really changed a whole lot because in terms of like acquiring users, we did shift our focus, I think, more to keeping and retaining users and kind of nurturing our current users. But that has been successful. I guess because we haven't been as focused and we did shift away from acquiring, we haven't as acquired as many as we had forecasted pre-COVID, which I think is normal and is okay. So I wouldn't really consider that an epic fail. Although, you know, long-term health of the app maybe will have a longer impact I could talk about in a few months. I could talk about like an epic fail for my career.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. If
Okay.
you are, if you're doing
I mean,
very well, if you're doing very well, it's good.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it also depends on how epic of a fail you want. We tried to do like a social media contest right as COVID started. That was like hashtag social distance with Stitcher that like got no traction. And I thought it was really like smart and clever and cute. And I was like, oh, people are going to be all over it. But I actually think it was too early. It was like March 9th, which was like when New York had shut down, but the rest of the country was like, still people were like, what's social distancing? So I think that maybe that was a little bit of a fail. That would have played a little better in like April or May when people really understood what was happening. So that can be my epic fail. Yeah, I think key learnings from COVID are just, like I said, I think nurturing, like we've done a lot of focus on nurturing current customers. And because of that, we've actually seen our retention beat our forecast for these months, even though, you know, there's kind of a lot working against us with like the change in routine and stuff. And so that has been a really good key takeaway that sometimes like simple things like just switching up messaging, being agile, really pinpointing certain audiences, like especially being more targeted with your push and targeted with your emails can be really beneficial.
Great. Yeah. Carter, what about you?
Yeah, okay. So I'll give one about kind of like growth marketing. That's the topic here. So I think like the biggest mistake we probably made was treating ad tech in probably the last 6 months as kind of one-off tasks to do rather than thinking about how to architecture a system that basically automates the one-off tasks. So we were treating kind of all of our like MMP and affiliate and like the other networks we are doing individually and doing kind of engineering tasks as a one-off. The thing is that created like, it was like a house of cards. There are 1,000 events being sent to 1,000 different people, and it's really hard to keep track of them. And when one thing breaks, a bunch of stuff falls down and a bunch of your performance marketing suffers. And what we should have done in retrospect and what we're doing now is start with planning out the infrastructure for that. Like we ended up going with, or we've been using them for a while, but just being more strict about it, using like a CDP. So we use Segment to kind of make the connection between ad networks, attribution providers, and like product data. And instead of relying on like a bunch of tools to kind of run user acquisition, you're actually relying on one tool. And then that funnels in all of your ad networks and all of your product data and connects the two. So it's much more, it's way less development effort because you only have one thing to deal with, and then you just connect like a new ad work into Segment rather than like installing like a new series of events. And then B, it makes it a lot less fragile because there's only one like set of tracking. Like there's only one tracking system, right? So if it's a lot easier to make sure that the one thing is working than to make sure that 10 things are working. Yeah, so shout out to Segment. It's a great tool.
Okay, cool. Marcy?
For the past 3 months, there have been no epic failures, but I would say we did run a growth test, and it was a small growth test, but we had an interesting learning that invalidated a hypothesis. So we had during our sort of welcome flow for new users, We tested the hypothesis that by separating the push notification to continue the process of sign up by 10 minutes from the web sign up flow, that we would have a higher conversion rate, with the hypothesis being that the push would interrupt the sign up flow. And that hypothesis was invalidated really significantly. Turns out the push did not interrupt the flow at all, and we in fact had a lower conversion rate for the delayed period. So I thought that was a really interesting growth test. It's always preferable in my mind to sort of invalidate what you make assumptions that you probably wouldn't have tested to begin with, but I was really interested to learn that.
Okay, cool. From my side, the biggest fail was that we were like, before COVID, we were pushing a lot of food category, and we were like strict with one key partner. And during the COVID, and we were like confident that we're gonna be winner, but no one expected that this partner, the main partner, would be shut down. And because of that, we're gonna lose a lot of money for the first phase of COVID. But the key learning from that we focus on another category, like grocery category, and it helps us during the crisis period, during the top crisis period, to get back on our position. And yeah, that's from my side, guys. Thank you so much for participation in this panel. Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you for your expertise. That was App Growth Summit, and very interesting panel. App Growth, what works and what not. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.